When European scientists first laid eyes on a platypus specimen in 1798, they didn't just question what they were looking at. They questioned reality itself. Picture this. You're a respected zoologist in London, and someone hands you what appears to be a beaver that's been surgically attached to a duck's bill and given venomous spurs. Your first thought isn't wonder. It's fraud. Today, we're diving into one of the most extraordinary cases where legitimate scientific discovery collided headfirst with conspiracy theories, hoax accusations, and complete disbelief from the world's leading experts. This isn't just a story of a weird animal. This is a story of how the platypus nearly broke science itself, and why some people still think there's more to this creature than meets the eye. The year is 1797, and Captain John Hunter, Governor of New South Wales, is about to send something back to Britain that will fundamentally challenge everything Europeans think they know about the natural world. Indigenous Australians had known about this creature for tens of thousands of years, calling it various names like Bundabura and Malangong. But to European eyes, what they were about to encounter was nothing short of impossible. When that first preserved platypus skin arrived at the British Museum, the reaction was immediate and unanimous. This has to be fake. George Shaw, the museum's keeper of natural history and one of the most respected zoologists of his time, spent considerable time examining the specimen with scissors, literally trying to find where the seams were. He was convinced that some clever taxidermist had sewn together parts from completely different animals. And honestly, can you blame him? The platypus violates every rule of mammalian classification that existed at the time. It has a bill like a duck, but it's covered in fur like a beaver. It has web feet for swimming, but also venomous spurs that can kill a dog. It lays eggs like a reptile, but produces milk like a mammal. From a European perspective, this wasn't just unusual. This was anatomically impossible. Shaw wasn't alone in his skepticism. The entire European scientific community was convinced they were looking at an elaborate hoax. Some theorized that Chinese craftsmen, known for their skill in creating fake curiosities for European collectors, had created the ultimate chimera. Others suggested it was the work of Australian colonists trying to fool the folks back home with tall tales from frontier. But here's where the story gets really interesting. As more specimens arrived, and as more detailed observations came from Australia, the evidence became harder to dismiss. Yet instead of acceptance, the platypus faced something even more challenging: scientific exile. Many researchers simply refused to classify it properly because it didn't fit into their existing categories. The platypus became trapped in what we might call taxonomic limbo. It was too weird to be real, but too real to be fake. This created a fascinating psychological phenomenon where respected scientists found themselves defending the impossible while simultaneously trying to explain it away. Carl Linnaeus, the father of modern taxonomy, had created a beautiful, orderly system for classifying life on Earth. Everything had its place, and every place had its rules. Mammals were warm-blooded, had hair, gave live birth, and produced milk. Birds laid eggs and had feathers. Reptiles were cold-blooded and laid leathery eggs. The platypus laughed in the face of these categories and asked, "Why not all the above?" What makes this story even more incredible is that the skepticism wasn't entirely unreasonable. The 18th and 19th centuries were absolutely flooded with fake specimens and fraudulent discoveries. P.D. Barnum was making a fortune with his Fiji mermaid, which was actually a monkey torso sewn onto a fishtail. Cryptozoologists were constantly claiming to have found evidence of dragons, unicorns, and other mythical beasts. In this environment of rampant deception, extraordinary claims really did require extraordinary evidence. The problem was that the platypus evidence was extraordinary, but in all the wrong ways. Every new detail that emerged seemed to make the creature less believable, not more. When reports came back that the male platypus had venomous spurs, scientists rolled their eyes. When Aboriginal accounts described the animal laying eggs, European zoologists dismissed it as primitive mythology. When observers claimed the platypus had electroreception abilities, allowing it to hunt with its eyes and ears closed by detecting electrical fields from other animals, the scientific community had heard enough. This is where our story takes a turn into genuine conspiracy territory. Some researchers began to suspect that the platypus reports weren't just mistaken observations or hoaxes, but part of a deliberate campaign to discredit European science. The thinking went like this. If you could convince respected institutions to officially recognize a made-up creature, you could undermine the entire scientific establishment. This paranoia was entirely unfounded. The late 18th century was a time of massive political upheaval. The American Revolution had shown that established authority could be overthrown. The French Revolution was turning the social order upside down. In this context, some European intellectuals saw attacks on scientific authority as part of a broader assault on civilization itself. The platypus became a symbol in this cultural war. Conservative scientists used it as an example of why traditional, careful methods of classification were superior to the hasty acceptance of every strange tale from the colonies. Progressive researchers argued that the platypus proved European science was too rigid and needed to be more open to new discoveries. Meanwhile, in Australia, the platypus continued to exist, completely oblivious to the academic chaos it was causing on the other side of the world. Aboriginal Australians found the European confusion somewhat amusing. They had detailed knowledge of platypus behavior, reproduction, and ecology that was accurate down to minute details. But European scientists dismissed this knowledge as superstition, preferring to rely on their own limited observations of preserved specimens. This cultural blindness created a feedback loop of misinformation. European scientists couldn't get accurate data because they wouldn't listen to indigenous knowledge. Without accurate data, they couldn't properly classify the platypus. Without proper classification, the creature remained in scientific limbo, fueling more conspiracy theories about its authenticity. The breakthrough came in 1884 when William Caldwell, a Cambridge-trained biologist, finally confirmed what Aboriginal Australians had been saying all along: platypuses lay eggs. His telegram to the British Association for the Advancement of Science was brief but earth-shattering. Monotremes oviparous, ovum meriblastic. In plain English, egg-laying mammals exist, and everything we thought we knew about mammalian reproduction is incomplete. But even this definitive proof didn't end the controversy. Instead, it shifted conspiracy theories in a new direction. Some researchers now claim that the platypus wasn't a hoax, but rather evidence of divine intervention in evolution. They argued that God had created this creature specifically to humble human scientific pride and remind people that nature's complexity exceeded human understanding. Others took the opposite approach, suggesting that the platypus was proof of evolution's randomness and arguing that it supported Charles Darwin's emerging theories about natural selection. The same creature that had been dismissed as impossible was now being used to support completely contradictory worldviews. This brings us to perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the entire platypus conspiracy. It reveals how scientific knowledge is constructed not just through observation, but through cultural negotiation. The platypus didn't change between 1798 and 1884, but society's willingness to accept its existence did. Modern DNA analysis has revealed that the platypus is indeed one of the most unique animals on Earth. It belongs to an ancient group called monotremes, which represents one of the earliest branches of mammalian evolution. The platypus genome is a bizarre patchwork that includes genes typically found in reptiles, birds, and mammals. From a genetic perspective, calling it a living fossil isn't an exaggeration. But here's where contemporary conspiracy theories enter the picture. Some modern researchers have suggested that the platypus is too genetically unique to have evolved naturally. They propose that it might be evidence of ancient genetic engineering, either by a lost civilization or extraterrestrial visitors. While mainstream science firmly rejects these ideas, they represent a continuation of the same impulse that led 19th century scientists to dismiss the platypus as a hoax. The electroreception abilities that seemed so impossible to early observers have now been confirmed and studied in detail. Platypuses have approximately 40,000 electroreceptor cells in their bills, allowing them to create detailed electrical maps of their underwater environment. This ability is so sophisticated that some researchers compare it to having a sixth sense. Recent discoveries have only added to the platypus's mystique. Scientists have found that platypus fur glows green and blue under ultraviolet light, for reasons that remain completely mysterious. They've discovered that platypus milk contains unique antibacterial compounds that could revolutionize antibiotic development. Each new finding seems to confirm that this creature is every bit as extraordinary as those first skeptical scientists feared. The platypus conspiracy also highlights how scientific institutions handle paradigm-shifting discoveries. Thomas Kuhn's work on scientific revolutions suggests that established paradigms resist change until the evidence becomes overwhelming. The platypus case study shows this resistance in action, but also demonstrates how truth eventually prevails, even when it challenges fundamental assumptions. What's particularly striking is how the platypus controversy predicted modern science communication challenges. The same dynamics that made 19th century scientists suspicious of platypus reports play out today with climate change, genetic engineering, and artificial intelligence research. Extraordinary claims still require extraordinary evidence, but the definition of extraordinary is often culturally determined rather than scientifically objective. The indigenous knowledge that European scientists initially dismissed as proven remarkably accurate. Aboriginal Australian stories about platypus behavior, ecology, and reproduction align closely with modern scientific findings. This represents a profound missed opportunity for early European researchers and highlights ongoing challenges in integrating traditional knowledge with formal scientific inquiry. Some contemporary historians argue that the platypus case represents a form of scientific colonialism, where European institutions claimed authority over knowledge systems they didn't understand. The fact that Aboriginal Australians had accurate platypus knowledge for millennia, while European scientists spent decades convinced the creature was impossible, reveals important blind spots in how scientific authority is constructed and maintained. The modern platypus faces new challenges that echo historical themes. Climate change is altering river systems throughout Australia, affecting platypus habitat. Pollution is contaminating waterways where platypuses hunt. Dam construction fragments populations and disrupts breeding cycles. In a strange historical irony, the creature that once seemed too impossible to exist now faces the very real possibility of extinction. Conservation efforts have revealed additional surprises about platypus biology and behavior. Recent studies using environmental DNA sampling have discovered platypus populations in areas where they were thought to be extinct. Other research has revealed complex social behaviors and communication methods that were previously unknown. Even after more than 2 centuries of study, the platypus continues to surprise researchers. The genetic uniqueness that made early scientists suspicious has become one of the platypus's most valuable traits for modern research. Platypus genes are providing insights into mammalian evolution, immune system function, and potential medical treatments. The creature that was once dismissed as scientifically worthless has become invaluable for understanding life on Earth. Perhaps the most important lesson from the platypus conspiracy is about intellectual humility. The scientists who initially dismissed the platypus weren't stupid or deliberately deceptive. They were applying rigorous standards of evidence within the framework of their current knowledge. Their mistake was assuming that their framework was complete rather than provisional. This has profound implications for how we approach scientific mysteries today. When we encounter phenomena that don't fit our current understanding, the platypus story reminds us that dismissal should be our last resort, not our first instinct. The most revolutionary discoveries often come disguised as impossible anomalies. The platypus also teaches us about the social construction of scientific truth. Facts don't speak for themselves. They require interpretation within cultural and theoretical frameworks. The same physical evidence that convinced Aboriginal Australians of the platypus's existence was interpreted by Europeans as proof of deception. Understanding this dynamic helps us recognize how cultural biases can influence scientific judgment. As we face new frontiers in science, from quantum mechanics to astrobiology, the platypus conspiracy offers both warning and encouragement. It warns us against premature dismissal of extraordinary claims while encouraging rigorous investigation. It reminds us that nature's creativity often exceeds human imagination and that our current knowledge, no matter how sophisticated, remains incomplete. The Great Platypus Conspiracy ultimately reveals that the most powerful hoaxes aren't deliberate deceptions, but the unconscious assumptions that prevent us from seeing truth when it's right in front of us. Sometimes the most extraordinary conspiracy is the one we create against our own ability to accept the extraordinary nature of reality itself. Today, the platypus swimming in Australian rivers carries the weight of this remarkable history. It remains one of the most unique creatures on Earth, a living reminder that nature's reality often exceeds our wildest imagination. The conspiracy that once surrounded its existence has evolved into a deeper understanding of how science, culture, and truth intersect in complex and sometimes surprising ways.